Let's take you further afield now, and North Carolina. The early voting there, the Chief Judge, Jacqueline Griffin, is calling for the process, or rather calling the process, a huge success. Over 40% of the eligible voters in the U.S. state have already cast their ballots. This is ahead of next week's presidential election. The Democratic Party candidate, Kamala Harris, is hoping to retake the state after former President Donald Trump secured a win for the Republicans back in 2016. Let's take a listen.
Every age, from 100, a little over 100, down to the 18-year-olds, the persons just beginning to turn 18 by November. We have every category. In this area, at my site, where I am Chief Judge, we don't have tension, we don't have violence. We are all a team, and we work as a team. Any escalation is de-escalated before it begins. We work together in unison with voters, campaigners, and everyone else.
Well, with early voting in the U.S. elections closing on the 2nd of November, the Democratic Party is hoping to entice the Gen Z voters in order to claw back support in the battle state of North Carolina. And that's where we find Newzroom Afrika's Ziyanda Ngcobo, who is in the U.S. for us. Ziyanda, good evening to you, and I'm sure it is possibly midday there or something towards that. You'll tell us the exact time. But importantly, I was just reading up on North Carolina, and there are some suggestions that voter turnout among black voters seems to be lagging, and this could be a warning sign for Kamala Harris. What's the sentiment on the ground?
Absolutely, Koli. It's quite a dynamic place to be in. It's one of the battlegrounds for this election. And as you'll know, that North Carolina has not been in the hands of the Democrats since 2008. In fact, it's only happened twice in U.S. election history, in the 1960s as well as in 2008 when Barack Obama won the election. And so in this election, Kamala Harris is really trying to claw back the support here in North Carolina. And it's very close, Koli, in terms of the polling, because in 2016, Donald Trump won by 3 percentage points. In 2020, it was 1 percentage point. So it's a very close election. And earlier on, we're at the John Chavez Memorial Center, where there was early voting. That's where, of course, you played the bite earlier with the Chief Judge, Jacqueline Griffin. And it seems there, when it comes to the Black American population, this is what the Democrats are targeting, but it's very close. And we spoke to 2 voters after they'd cast their ballots, and they've raised issues similar to what we've raised. One is concerned about how young men are being, treated in the U.S., and others are concerned about women's rights, in particular abortion. Let's take a listen.
Well, I do know it is a really, really tight race. And like everybody's been saying, it's so important that everybody comes out and votes. And even though we vote one way or the other, we can't forget, as America, the United States, we have to come out and vote. It is our right for our country, so we need to do it. We are very divided. We know it is very, very close. And I know a lot of people who are taking the election to heart, especially in referring to women's rights. We do not want to set back women's rights in the United States.
Just hoping that everything turns out okay in this election. I think that North Carolina will turn the state blue this year.
Well, Toli, that's just some of the views at the one voting station. We're now at the North Carolina State University, and this is where then a lot of young people are voting. In fact, it's just young people. And, in other pieces that I've read, Bloomberg, PBS.org, there's a lot of talk about the Gen Z voter really possibly bolstering Kamala Harris's, prospects. But let's bring in one first-time voter, Theo Stewart, who's gracefully agreed to speak to us. Thank you so much for your time. How are you feeling now that you've cast your ballot?
I actually feel pretty good about it and pretty strong in my choices. I'm usually one to do research on candidates, but I haven't had time. But like the limited research I have does make me feel pretty good about the differences between the candidates and who I personally think would be quite a bit better.
Okay. And what kind of things were you looking out for? I mean, it's your first time. What guided you in terms of your decision?
So I am a transgendered man, and not only was I born a woman, I am also trans, which is very clear from Donald Trump that he does not support. And my rights to get any sort of medical care that I want and or need is on the line. My rights to just exist as a human being is on the line. And I really appreciate Kamala Harris's approach towards like people of color, even though I myself am not one. I do know quite a few people, and I know how Donald Trump treats people of color and who he backs, and thus I don't like his policies and politics, thus Kamala Harris.
I mean, we spoke to a few people at another voting station earlier, and they were talking about how divided you are in North Carolina. Do you get that sense as well as a young person here on campus, or is everyone going about their business as usual?
It is pretty divided as you go around North Carolina. Like where I'm from specifically is incredibly red and incredibly like pro-Trump, pro-Republican, and here it's more of a division scenario of I've heard people talking about like their thoughts on being Republican versus Democrat versus if you go like 40 minutes away to like Chapel Hill, they're fairly blue leaning too. It's just around, and thus that's why we are a pretty divided state, very up in the air.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it will get better or worse, you know, especially because you're young? You're 19 years old. You would think that young people, it's a bit better, or are you finding that old people's politics is affecting you as a young person?
They definitely are. I just didn't have the means to even remotely change it until now. The policies enacted by like Gen X affect us to this day, and it gets blamed on the wrong people of like, oh, the housing prices are too high. Oh, inflation's insane. And I'm like, you guys do know from a basic civics economics class that it takes years for that sort of thing to rise. And so the things that happened like 4 years ago are what we're seeing now. And knowing that my chances of being able to own a home are slim to